Nothing in royal history compares to the morning King Charles decided to ruin his own wife.
That really ended in disaster, frankly, which was a total tragedy because we've lost all those years in between, so there's a lot to catch up.
Behind closed doors, while the most powerful people in that family stood frozen in shock, Charles tore Camilla's whole world apart with a single signature. Her title, her power, her place next to the throne, all gone within minutes. But what did Camilla really do to deserve such a brutal fall? That is the part of this story that will truly shock you. Because even the people closest to her never expected it. The chair that started a war. The reception hall at Windsor Castle was already full when Camilla walked in early, long before the doors had even opened for the rest of the family. Charles had sent out a sealed order a few days before, and everyone important already knew exactly what it said. The chair closest to the king, the one that mattered most in the whole room, belonged to Catherine. Now, that one instruction was not just some small detail hidden in a planning paper. Inside a palace built on rank and order, a choice like that shouted one message to everyone watching. The future had already arrived, and Camilla was no longer in the front seat. But why now? Because Charles could feel time running out. The plan to hand real power to William and Catherine was moving faster than anyone outside the palace walls could imagine. And Charles needed his own wife to understand the new order before the whole world learned about it. Camilla had read that order herself. And instead of accepting it, she walked into that hall, fully set on proving it would never stand. So she dropped into that chair before a single other guest had even sat down and grabbed both arms of it like she was daring anyone to try to move her. An aide hurried over, picking her words with care, the way someone speaks when they know they are about to ask a queen to stand up. She begged Camilla as gently as she could to take her assigned seat instead. But Camilla ignored her completely. She kept staring straight ahead and held the chair tightly as if the aide had never said a word. A few older nobles standing nearby saw the whole thing and quickly looked away, the way people do when they feel a storm coming and want no part of it. The aide stepped back and shot a fast glance toward the door, hoping someone with real authority would step in and do what she could not. But no one standing in that hall had any idea what was really happening behind the scenes. That aide had not gone to Camilla by herself. Princess and had sent her. For weeks, and had believed that Camilla would never give up her place without forcing someone else to demand it first. Now she had the proof she needed, seen by people who had no reason to lie about what they saw. Princess Catherine reached the doorway just as the standoff was happening and froze in place. She watched another woman sitting in the exact chair that had been promised to her in writing, and she said nothing. Then William came in right behind her and saw the same thing. His own wife had been pushed aside in front of half the household while the woman who caused it sat there as if nothing was wrong. Something inside him wanted to storm across that room and say exactly what he thought. But Catherine caught his eye before he could move. And that one look stopped him at once. One wrong word from the future king in front of so many witnesses could have turned an awkward moment into a war this family might never recover from. Later that day, alone with his wife, William finally asked her why she had not simply told the whole room that the chair was hers. Catherine calmly told him that no version of that fight would have ended well for either of them, and that some battles are not worth winning in public even when you are fully right. So why did one chair carry so much weight? The answer goes back farther than anyone in that hall could explain that morning. Years earlier, another queen consort had quietly been forced to give up that same seat during her own family's crisis over succession. She never fought it the way Camilla was choosing to fight now. And within a few years, she had been sent off to a quiet country home far from the capital, and the public hardly saw her again for the rest of her life. Staff still whisper the nickname they gave that chair, being careful never to say it when a royal might be close enough to hear. They call it the abdication chair. Camilla knew that name, and she knew exactly what she was doing the moment she sat in it. This was no accident. This was a furious woman daring her husband's whole family to repeat history right in front of her face, betting everything that her story would end differently from the last woman's. Charles did not wait for the ceremony to end before he struck. The moment the hall began to clear, he grabbed Camilla by the arm and pulled her into an empty corridor, away from advisors and away from anyone who might repeat what was about to be said. He asked her one question in a calm but firm voice. Why would she defy him in public after he had told her exactly what he expected in writing days earlier? Camilla's answer was not an apology. It was a threat dressed up as the complaint of a hurt wife. She told Charles she refused to disappear just because the next generation was eager to take her place. Charles then calmly asked if she understood exactly what she had just done in front of so many witnesses. Camilla answered without even pausing. She told him she understood it perfectly, and she would do the exact same thing again if it meant proving she was more than a woman waiting to be pushed aside. That single sentence frightened Charles more than any public scene ever could. It told him that his wife believed the crown itself was running out of room for her, and that she would tear it open herself if she had to. Charles walked away shaken in a way he refused to let anyone in his family see, because for the first time he was no longer sure if he was married to a wounded woman or a woman quietly planning her own takeover. That fear was still heavy in his chest when Anne came to find him carrying something far more dangerous than anything that had happened in that hall. The file that tore them apart. Anne did not hand her brother a folder about one chair. She handed him a loaded weapon hidden inside paperwork. And once Charles opened it, there was no way to close it again. Inside that folder were months of proof that Camilla had been working against him the whole time. She had quietly changed his instruction without anyone's permission. Royal appointments had again and again been given to people loyal to Camilla instead of the people Charles had actually chosen himself. One page showed a household job that Charles had personally approved for a certain man, secretly given instead to a cousin of one of Camilla's closest friends. Another page showed a ceremonial guest list that had been changed twice in a single week. Each time, names linked to Catherine's family were removed and names linked to Camilla's own side were added. None of these moves were loud enough on their own to start a war. But lined up together in one folder, they shouted exactly what Camilla had been building behind Charles's back the whole time. So that chair at Windsor was never just about one woman losing her temper for a moment. It was one part of a much bigger plan that had finally burst out into the open where the whole family could see it for themselves. As if that was not enough betrayal already, buried at the very bottom of that file was a record of a secret meeting between someone in Camilla's own household and a contact from another royal court, comparing notes on exactly how a different queen consort had managed to keep real power long after her husband wanted her removed from public life. That meeting had happened quietly off the official calendar, arranged through a personal favor instead of any proper channel. To Charles, that one detail mattered more than anything else in the folder. This was not a woman simply reacting to the fear of being pushed aside. This was a woman who had spent months learning exactly how to avoid losing her grip on power. Charles hid that page, not out of mercy, but because showing it to Camilla would mean admitting he had watched her whole household for over a year. Even while standing on strong moral ground, the king was still hiding a dirty secret from the very woman he was about to crush. That same evening, Charles called Camilla to his private study, completely alone. With no advisors standing between them this time, he slammed the changed seating plan down on the desk, the one with names crossed out in handwriting that belonged to neither of them, and asked her the real question he had called her there to ask. Had she ever truly planned to respect the future he was building for this family? Or had she simply been waiting for the right moment to grab back what she felt belonged to her? Camilla did not even try to deny that she knew the chair belonged to Catherine. She told him flatly that giving up every visible sign of her rank would leave her a queen in name only, like a crown with nothing real under it. Charles quickly pointed out that no one had asked her to give up her title. They had only asked her to respect one seating chart for one single afternoon. Camilla let out a sharp, bitter laugh with no warmth in it at all and told him that in this family, one chair was never just one chair. It was always the first step toward losing everything. She reminded him that she had fought her way through years of public hatred and rejection just to reach this place. Watching it all slide away now while everyone smiled and called it progress felt to her like watching her own victory being stolen. Charles answered with one line that ended the fight before it could fully begin. The throne, he told her, was never built to prove how much they loved each other. He still loved her, and he said it clearly, looking straight into her eyes. But as king, he could not let that love matter more than the future of this family or the order of who came next. Camilla tore the brooch off her coat and slammed it down on the desk between them. She told him he could not keep asking her to wear the signs of power while taking away every piece of power those signs were supposed to show. On the surface, it looked like a dramatic, heartbroken gesture. But the truth under it was much colder. That brooch had never legally belonged to Camilla in the first place. It came from a trust controlled by the crown and was only ever loaned to a consort while she actively carried out royal duties. The lawyer who managed that trust had warned her office months earlier, clearly explaining what would happen to the brooch and several other pieces if her public role ever changed. Camilla had read that warning and thrown it aside, fully sure it would never really come to that. So putting that brooch down was not a sacrifice. It was the law finally catching up to a woman who thought she could outrun it forever. Charles ignored her drama and opened the rest of Anne's file in front of her, page after page, showing documented contact between her own office and the people who had quietly planned the seating change at Windsor. Camilla made one last move to defend herself and accused William's people of building a case to destroy her completely, but Charles cut her off at once, cold and hard. His son had suggested nothing. He had made this whole decision himself, alone. And he wanted her to understand that before she walked out that door blaming the wrong person for her own fall. That one correction shattered whatever defense Camilla still had left. And as she rose from her chair, her eyes burned with both fury and grief. Camilla did not beg for forgiveness. She did not ask for more time. She left the brooch lying exactly where she had thrown it, marched to the door, and walked out without a single look back. A king can crush his wife behind one locked door, but no decision this huge survives on one man's signature alone. Within hours, Charles would need the rest of the family standing beside him. And every one of them was about to discover that destroying Camilla's role meant changing their own futures too. Whether they wanted it or not, while a queen was being erased in total silence, Charles, William, Catherine, and Prince Edward gathered around one long table the next morning, and not one of them came there for the same reason. William wanted the family to remain steady, and wanted order restored after watching the rules bend too long for one person. Catherine wanted nothing more than to stay out of a fight she never asked to join. Edward, quieter than the others, mostly wanted to avoid being blamed later for whatever was decided in that room. The king's secretary laid out the plan with no mercy at all. Camilla's marriage could not be erased by any order signed that day. Her public duties, her household staff, and her access to royal privilege, however, could be stripped away piece by piece and put under the direct control of the king's own office. From that morning on, anything tied to Camilla, any event, any appointment, any public word, would need approval from Charles's central staff first, with no exceptions for old loyalties or shared history. Catherine looked down at the new schedule and felt her stomach sink at once. Her own name now stood beside ceremonies that had belonged to Camilla only days earlier. She knew exactly how this would look to anyone watching from outside the palace gates. Every duty she accepted from then on could be twisted into proof that she had gained from another woman's destruction. Whether that was fair or not, William made it painfully clear in front of everyone at that table that his wife must never look as if she had asked for any of this. He feared public sympathy for Camilla could quickly turn into public suspicion of Catherine, damaging the very future they had spent years quietly building together. And cut straight through the tension without softening even one word. Protecting Camilla from the results of her own choices would weaken the crown itself, she told her brother plainly. Because rules only matter if they hit the people closest to the throne just as hard as everyone else. Edward said almost nothing during the whole meeting, but his silence told everyone in that room that this alliance against Camilla was no longer just an idea. It was already happening with or without his blessing. Charles signed the final order himself before anyone left that table. Written so it could never be undone by illness, by pressure, or by a sudden change of heart. And he warned his son directly that a future king must never confuse love with duty. What followed was not a headline. It was silence. And that silence cut deeper than any public scandal ever could. Camilla's calendar emptied completely, with no explanation sent her way at all. Staff who had entered her rooms every single morning for years were suddenly sent elsewhere. Then came the order to clear her entire office before sunset that very same day. Camilla refused to pack a single box herself. Doing that with her own hands would feel like agreeing with Charles's decision, and she was nowhere near ready to give him that victory. An aide was quietly taking framed photographs down from the walls when Camilla crossed the room and pulled one photo right out of the aide's hands, clutching it to her chest without saying a word. It was a photograph of herself smiling lovingly at Charles, taken years before any of this had begun. Then Camilla discovered that the next major state ceremony had already been rewritten with her name completely removed. That was the exact second her loss stopped being private and became something the whole kingdom was about to see for itself. As if that was not cruel enough already, some of the people Camilla had gathered around herself over the years did not simply disappear because she lost one argument with her husband. Instead, they tried to cause damage inside the palace. One of her dismissed staff members, furious at being thrown out without warning, leaked part of what had happened in that family meeting to a tabloid reporter before the palace had even finished its official statement. The leak did not include every detail, but it included enough. It named the chair, the brooch, and the fact that Charles had personally signed an order that could never be undone. Charles's own team rushed around for hours trying to control a story that was supposed to unfold only on his terms. To make things worse, news of the whole restructuring reached Harry secondhand, through a staff member instead of through his own father or brother. No one in the family had bothered to call him directly, and that one fact told him everything he needed to know about where he still stood with those people. Harry was not defending Camilla at all. He was simply using her fall as proof of the exact same pattern that had pushed him out of this family years before any of this ever touched her. In one single moment, this stopped being a story about one marriage falling apart and became, in the eyes of the public, proof that this family quietly erases anyone who becomes inconvenient, one person at a time. That same evening, Charles walked past Camilla's half-emptied office without going inside. He saw his own shadow stop beneath her closed door. For 1 second, she truly expected the handle to turn, but it never did. That night, he sent no advisor and no formal message. He only sent a short handwritten note asking her to meet him in the small garden room at first light. By sunset, the king's own authority had stripped Camilla of everything that had once surrounded her. But at dawn, Charles would face her without a single document, without one advisor, and without the crown standing between them at all. Could love even survive what came next? What survived the crown? At dawn, there were no guards outside the garden room. No secretaries moving papers around, and no family members waiting nearby in case everything broke apart. Charles arrived first and waited there completely alone. Camilla walked in a few minutes later, holding the same photograph she had pulled from her office the day before. For the first time since this whole war began, they were not king and consort facing each other across a desk. They were just two people trying to learn whether a love that had survived so much could survive something as heavy as the crown itself. She slammed the photograph down on the small table between them and demanded to know if he had done all this because she had embarrassed the family or because he simply no longer believed in her. Charles did not hide behind official language the way he had with everyone else. He told her plainly that he still loved her, and he meant every word. But love could never excuse putting their relationship above the future of this family and the order of who came next. Camilla admitted for the first time ever that fear had driven every part of her defiance from the start. She had survived years of public hatred just to earn her place in this family. So watching Catherine rise so quickly felt like watching every painful step she had taken get wiped away completely. Then Camilla did something Charles never expected. She agreed on her own to stop competing with Catherine for good. She asked for no later reversal and no secret promise that things might quietly change down the road. Charles gave his answer just as clearly as she had given hers. She would remain his wife. She would keep a protected private home and her personal dignity, but her public role as queen was gone forever, and nothing would ever bring it back. She closed his hand around the brooch one final time and told him the crown could now decide where it truly belonged, because she had no fight left in her over it. Neither of them smiled. Neither of them walked away either. What neither of them understood was that the garden room had not been empty at all. A young groundskeeper, sent in early to tend the room before they arrived, had accidentally overheard parts of that private conversation. And days later, a darker rumor began spreading quickly through the kingdom, leading straight back to that overheard talk. People started saying Charles had secretly offered Camilla a huge financial settlement in exchange for her total silence for the rest of her life. The palace never directly denied that rumor, and that silence alone let the story grow wild and unchecked. By breakfast, this story belonged to the whole kingdom and not just the palace anymore. People argued about it everywhere, on television, in busy train stations, on every newspaper stand across the country. Some called it royal discipline finally being enforced after years of looking the other way. Others called it a husband sacrificing his own wife to save an institution that, in their view, did not deserve such a sacrifice. One news presenter even called it the greatest personal sacrifice of Charles's whole reign. And Charles turned off the television the second he heard those words. One major newspaper printed a photograph of an empty ceremonial chair under the headline, "The Queen Who Stepped Away," and that single image said more than any official statement ever could. Outside the palace gates, a crowd gathered quietly in the rain. One woman left a small bouquet by the gate. Another shouted loudly enough for the cameras to catch every word that no crown was worth losing an entire family. Catherine's first public appearance under the new arrangement did not go smoothly either. Camilla's old household, still being broken apart and reassigned, somehow forgot to update one important briefing note before the event began. So Catherine stood there, clearly caught off guard by a small procedural detail right in front of the cameras. It was a small mistake, and she recovered quickly. But people who understood how palaces really worked saw it for exactly what it was. Camilla's grip had not fully loosened just because she had put down one brooch. The family's first full public appearance under the new order became the true and final judgment on everything that had happened. Charles walked out alone in the king's position, steadying himself against a nearby table before forcing himself to keep moving through the crowd. Catherine followed as the family's leading woman now, a role she had never asked for and received only because another woman had fallen from it. William walked beside her, fully aware that this huge new responsibility had come to them through pain, not through victory. Camilla watched from a distance, wearing none of the jewels or signs that had once marked her rank. She looked calm, grieving underneath it all, but no longer fighting any part of it. And stood near her brother once the ceremony ended, and she said nothing at all. She did not need to. Her presence alone reminded Charles that he had chosen duty over comfort, and no amount of public approval would ever repay him for a choice that heavy. Charles returned to the private apartments afterward, where Camilla was already waiting. No officials followed him inside. Nobody brought up restoring her title, and nobody in that room expected them to. He sat down beside her, and she reached out and took his hand without being asked. She had not stopped mattering to him, and her whole history with this family had not been erased just because her title was gone. She had only lost the future she had fought for years to secure. Because in the end, Charles chose the survival of the crown over protecting the place she had spent her whole life building within it. Their love survived this war. But her reign did not. And the announcement that stunned an entire kingdom finally showed what it had really been about from the beginning. It was never the end of a marriage between two people who still loved each other. It was the end of one woman's shared place on the throne, leaving Charles with his crown and leaving Camilla with whatever dignity she still had left to carry, and leaving the entire monarchy forever changed by the moment love and power were finally torn apart for good.